Just hours from now, President Biden will address the nation on the fight against the winter COVID surge. CNN has learned the president will announce a plan for hundreds of millions of free at-home rapid COVID tests to be distributed. Joining us now is Dr. Anthony Fauci, chief medical advisor on COVID to President Biden and director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Dr. Fauci, thanks so much for being with us. My question to you is, how often and when should we all be testing?
You know, it really depends on the situation you're in. For example, if you are going to be going to a function, a dinner, and you're vaccinated, hopefully, and boosted, but you want to go the extra step, the extra mile to make sure that the people that you are in a setting with, hopefully all of whom are vaccinated and boosted, you want to go that extra step, you should do that. What many families are doing when people, for example, come in from out of town, even though they are vaccinated and boosted, before they get together in the home to get one of those rapid tests that you can get literally the result in 15 minutes or less. Also, if you're in a situation where you may have been exposed to someone, you might want to get tested a few days later to make sure that you're in a situation where you have not been infected.
The way that this is spreading, Omicron right now, you can see how 500 million tests would go pretty quickly. And we're not expecting them to come online for a few weeks, Dr. Fauci. I mean, we need these tests yesterday. So what kind of impact will that make?
Well, I think, first of all, testing is important, as is masking. But the real important thing that people need to do is to get vaccinated. And if you are vaccinated fully, to get boosted. That's the main front line of protection. Testing is an important supplement to that. You're correct. We have had in the past not as many tests as everyone would have wanted or needed, but part of the president's program, which he will be speaking about this afternoon, is to dramatically increase the availability of testing, with putting up about 20,000 testing sites, with getting 500 million tests very quickly, literally within the next few days, and then have a situation where you can get anywhere from 200 million to 500 million tests per month. So we will be able to very soon have all the tests that people need, because you are correct. It is an important part of the comprehensive program of staying safe.
We do get the sense that there's going to be a shift in focus from number of cases, from fact of infection to severity of infections. Why is that important?
Well, it's important because you can get maybe a little bit of a misrepresentation of the severity and the impact. If you have a situation where there are infections, particularly breakthrough infections, John, which there will be, we know that. We've seen that with Delta. We'll likely see more of it with Omicron because its extraordinary capability of transmitting from person to person. But if you get infections at a higher rate, but the lack of impact on severity might be important. So if you really want to look at the true impact on society, it's much more important to see who gets sick and who doesn't, who requires hospitalization or doesn't. So if we have a larger number of people getting infected, but the degree of severity is very, very low, that would be very important. And if you just count the numbers of infections, you may get a misrepresentation as to what is actually going on. That's the reason why you're seeing the shift now in thinking. You obviously want to pay attention to the number of infections because they could be the forerunner of severity. But if you have a lot of infections and less severity, it's much more important to focus on hospitalizations.
Dr. Aziz Shah at Brown University suggests that, like you said, we're going to see breakthrough infections with people who are doubly vaccinated and boosted, but these people largely will be asymptomatic or only mild symptoms. And what are the considerations about the CDC guidelines that say right now you need to isolate for 10 days after a positive test? Dr. Shah says it might be worth reducing that length of time, given that these people are going to be asymptomatic.
Well, that is going to be, that's certainly an important consideration which is being discussed right now, particularly, John, in the context of healthcare workers. For example, if you get a healthcare worker who's infected and without any symptoms at all, you don't want to keep that person out of work too very long, because particularly if we get a run on hospital beds and the need for healthcare personnel, that's something that at least will be considered, no decisions yet, about the possibility if you do have someone who's infected, rather than keeping them out for 7 or 10 days, if they are without symptoms, put an N95 mask on them, make sure they have the proper PPE, and they might be able to get back to work sooner than the full length of the quarantine period.
So there is at least a consideration for changing that recommendation, reducing it from 10 days.
Yes, there is a consideration that's being discussed.
I want to ask you, you made a recommendation a few days ago. You say that people who are vaccinated and boosted should feel perfectly comfortable gathering with loved ones over Christmas as long as they travel safely with masks and getting there. You suggest maybe getting tested. Given the new news about Omicron taking over, given the very quick rise in cases in New York and other places, are you still comfortable with that guidance?
I am, if people are vaccinated and boosted and do the things that I said. You want to be prudent and always be extra special careful, because you're dealing with an unprecedented situation of a virus that has an extraordinary capability of transmitting. You want to make sure, for example, when you travel to see relatives who are vaccinated and boosted, that you don't get into a situation where you go to an airport, you don't have a mask on, you're in an indoor congregate setting. That's what I mean about being careful. But when you're in the home with vaccinated and boosted people, you could feel comfortable enjoying the holiday celebration.
Dr. Fauci, one of the things with Omicron especially, and with some evidence, though not conclusive, we're still waiting, that it may cause less severe infections. You hear a lot of people, again, particularly vaccinated and boosted people, saying, you know what, we're all going to get this, but it's not going to be that bad. Let's just get through this. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I advise against that, John, because even though it may be, and I think it might be actually, knowing from what we're seeing in South Africa, it might turn out to be overall Omicron being somewhat less severe. But, everything is relative. When you say less severe, that you're still going to get a lot of people who are going to get sick and be in the hospital. There may be less, relatively speaking, than with other variants, but that doesn't mean that you're completely exempt from getting serious illness. So it is ill-advised to be cavalier about it and say, well, who cares if I get infected? Not only for your own health and those around you, but for your communal responsibility of not wanting to be a vehicle to spread it to someone else. So there's a lot of considerations that argue against feeling, well, who cares if I get infected? It's important that you don't get infected.
And obviously, as you've said repeatedly, the unvaccinated people are in for a very, very difficult winter, which brings me to my next piece of sound here. We heard the former president over the weekend, for the first time, reveal that he got the booster shot. Listen to this.
Both the president and I are vaxxed, and did you get the booster?
Yes.
I got it too. Okay, so
Don't. No. That's all. There's a very tiny group over there.
Again, what's your reaction to hearing that? What kind of a difference does it make now? What kind of a difference would it have made if he'd been out there preaching the benefits of the booster all along?
Well, I would have liked any public persons, particularly former President Trump, who has a large number of followings, to have benefited from what he said. But you noted, John, in the background, they were booing him, which just doesn't make any sense at all, to boo someone who's saying they did the right thing from a public health standpoint. I'm very pleased that he did say that and come out publicly and say that he has been vaccinated and boosted. But to get booed for saying that just tells you about the extraordinary divisiveness we have going into this public health issue, which should be devoid of divisiveness. It should just be focusing on what the public health principles are.
On the subject of divisiveness, Dr. Fauci, I'm not going to play it because, frankly, I think it's dangerous. But Jesse Waters, who is a Fox News entertainer, was giving a speech to a conservative group where he talked about you and suggested to the crowd that they ambush you with what he said was some kind of rhetorical kill shot. That was his exact word. I'm wondering, how much that concerns you when you hear language like that about you and your well-being.
Well, John, that's horrible. I mean, that just is such a reflection of the craziness that goes on in society. The only thing that I have ever done throughout these 2 years is to encourage people to practice good public health practices, to get vaccinated, to be careful in public settings, to wear a mask. And for that, you have some guy out there saying that people should be giving me a kill shot to ambush me. I mean, what kind of craziness is there in society these days? That's awful that he said that. And he's going to go very likely unaccountable. I mean, whatever network he's on is not going to do anything for him. I mean, that's crazy. The guy should be fired on the spot.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, I want to end on a happier note. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and also a happy birthday coming up in a few days.
Thank you.
I hope you get to enjoy some peace and quiet with your family.
And thank you very much, John, and to you and yours too. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Anthony Fauci.